so let's make sure everything's working here. Test. Yeah, it looks like it's good. All right. And for some reason, I don't know why, this won't stream to Instagram. So just give me 1 second here. I'm going to try this again. I'm using this thing called Yellow Duck that apparently will link to Instagram, but it hasn't been working very well. So just give me a second while I try to get this set up. What I thought I would do today is actually just go through some Q&A that I've gotten just from clients and that kind of thing. So that's the plan today, and you'll actually be able to see the question at the bottom of the screen as well. So you'll know what I'm talking about if you happen to forget partway through. All right, let's see if this works. Also, if you have a question, type it into the chat. I should be able to see it as well. Yeah, maybe just type something into the chat if you're watching this. I want to see if it's going to pop up for me. That way, if you do have a question along the way, you can actually answer it or have it answered as well. All right. Any chat going on? Give me 1 second here, guys. Give me 1 second here, guys. Yeah, it looks like I can see things. All right, so we'll just kind of get going today. Like I said, if you do have a question, feel free to pop it into the chat. I should be able to see it. And again, I'm going to be answering questions that I've gotten over the last several weeks, and we'll just kind of go through them. So I also haven't seen these questions before, aside from actually loading them up into this program. So you're going to get some fairly unprepared feedback, I guess, would be the answer. All right. So the first question there, do you eat to live or live to eat? And I don't think that's an either or question. I don't think that's something that is a one or the other sort of thing. I think that there certainly are people who eat to live out there, and there's also people who live to eat. Those would be your foodies and that kind of thing. Which either or is fine. But for me, it's more of a combination of both. There are times where I'll prepare my food ahead of time and whatnot, and because I have a specific goal that I'm focusing on. So in those sort of circumstances, I would say that I am sort of eating to live or for maximal performance, which is usually what I'm eating for. But then at the same time, there are times throughout the week where I'll live to eat, and that's where I'm going out for dinner with family or friends, and just having kind of a nice dinner. Maybe we're having a barbecue or something at the place. That's when I'm going to live to eat sort of thing, and just not really worry too much about what I'm actually eating. So I don't think it's an either or question. I think it's one of those questions where you need to sort of come up with a solution for yourself. And for some reason, I can't see Chuck's question. 1 second. All right. So hopefully that answers that question. I don't think it's an either or question. I think it's something that you need to come up with on your, for yourself, depending on your goals. Like I said, if I'm eating for performance, then I'm being pretty strict with my diet, and I'm not going to go over and above or beyond what I'm going to be eating. But at the same time, I do like to have times throughout the week where I'm having a nice dinner with family and friends and that kind of thing. So that's essentially how I would go about doing something like that. A bit of a combination of the two. All right. So our next question here is, what do I do with an injured muscle? Well, I suppose that's a good question. I guess the easy answer is fix it, but I guess it would depend on what you mean by injured. It would depend on sort of how bad it hurts. Like, is this a sore muscle, or is this something that has been damaged and actually needs some serious repair? So that's where I would start with that. Generally speaking, though, if it, I like this idea of, if it hurts, don't do it. To me, a lot of what we do in the fitness industry can be equivalent to, I'll steal an example from Michael Boyle, who basically answered this question with, if it hurts, don't do it. He said that a lot of what we do in the fitness industry is kind of like slamming our hand in the car door. If you've ever had that experience, and I don't recommend you do, if you slam your hand in the car door, what are the chances of you doing it again? You probably shouldn't. You don't want to keep slamming the door on your hand. You want to get your hand out of the way so you can actually close the door. And that's kind of the approach I take with injured muscles as well. So if something's hurting, well, we're going to stop doing whatever's hurting the muscle, and we're going to find ways around it. So there's a little bit of avoidance, and then we kind of get into the root problem. So maybe we need to do some corrective exercises or something like that to help out the injured muscle and try to figure out why it's injured. And then worst case scenario, you just have to refer out. So you've got to send them to a physiotherapist or someone who's got more knowledge in that area than you. With any luck, they'll bring back some sort of answer for you, and you can build your programs out from there. They'll usually give you some suggestions for exercises, things to avoid, and some things that you can build into your program as well. Next question here is, I can't do a full pull-up. What should I do? Well, that's a good question. So you can regress a pull-up in a few different ways. The first thing that you can do is use like a super band, like one of those elastic bands, and you can tie it to the pull-up bar and stick your foot into the bottom of the loop, and that will help assist your pull-up. So that's one thing you can do. I would recommend get yourself to the top of the pull-up. So where you've got your chin just above the bar, like maybe you need to set up a box to get there, and you just sort of climb up and hold yourself there. So you can do like a flexed arm hang, and then progressing that, you'll want to do a slow eccentric. So I'll get myself to the top of the pull-up, I'll step off the box, and I will slowly lower myself back down to the floor to the point where my feet are touching the ground, or just a few inches off the ground, and I'll let myself fall. So I'm working through a full range of motion. And yeah, so I want to make sure I'm going through that full range of motion, but that's what I would do if I couldn't do a full pull-up. So I'd start with a flexed arm hang to just sort of build some strength in that top position, and then I'd progress it to doing just an eccentric pull-up. So I start at the top, lower myself down, and then I would move to a band. Now, the nice thing about those super bands is you can buy them with different resistance. So I would start you with the thickest, heaviest band that we can get around your foot, and then go from there. You may need a partner as well. You can have a partner kind of help you up from the hips as well. That option is a little bit difficult if you're not with a trainer, because your friend may help you too much, in which case you're not getting as much benefit from the exercise as you might hope. All right, so moving on to the next one. Let me just see if there's anything in the chat here yet. I don't see anything. I feel like there probably are people who... So what if I don't want to give up beer? Well, I mean, don't give up beer. Something about trainers and nutritionists, you know, if you don't want to give up beer, then don't give it up. I think a lot of trainers get caught up on the idea that we need too much of a reductionist attitude to our nutrition programs. And I think that a lot of people think that we just need to remove all the quote unquote bad food from our diets. I would challenge you to think that there's no such thing as bad food. There's just more beneficial or less beneficial food, right? Food doesn't really have like a moral obligation to it. What I would say is, you know, you need to work with your health and fitness professional to decide on what the best nutritional program is going to be for you. If there are things in it that you don't want to give up, then don't give them up. What I like to do with my clients when it comes to looking at their nutritional profile, we'll do a big audit first. So I will ask them to pick 3 days out of the week and just write down everything that they consume on those 3 days. One of those days should be a day off. So a day where you're not normally working. And then what we do, and then I'll ask them to list their 5 favorite foods and also list what their favorite foods are that they ate that week. Then I'll ask them to circle their top 2 and delete the rest. So what I've done, the reason I picked 3 days is because I really think anything more than that is just too much to do. There's just too much involved. Writing down everything you eat every single day is a lot of work, especially for someone who's just starting their fitness journey. And then what we've done, so that'll give me a good idea of what you eat the majority of the time throughout the week. And then typically we eat quite differently on our days off than we do our weekdays while we're at work. So that'll give me an idea of what you're eating on the weekends, for example. Then I ask you to circle to list your 5 favorite foods and circle your top 2. So now I've established what your favorite foods are. And what I would do is I would make sure you're eating those on your day off. The next thing that I do is I would go through the entire thing and figure out how many calories you're eating. And then based on what your fitness goal is, I would come up with a plan, ask you to look over it and see if it's manageable. Is this something that you can actually manage throughout the week with your work week, with how busy you are and all the things that you've got to get done? And we would go from there. I've had plenty of clients who, you know, they didn't want to give up alcohol or beer or whatever it was. And that's perfectly fine. We would build that into their program. I have had clients who had like 12 to 16 beers like a night. So we did have to reduce that fairly substantially depending on what their goal was. And I mean, that ends up being a conversation about, you know, what's more important to you. I've also had clients who like one glass of wine sort of at the end of the day, sort of thing, to wind down. That's fine. That's something we can build into your program as well. But it really becomes a point of calorie adjustment. So, how many calories are we taking in? How many calories are we expending? And where are the opportunities to where are opportunities to change your diet? But by the way, it is absolutely possible to lose weight and still drink beer and alcohol, and it is absolutely possible to increase muscle mass while drinking beer and alcohol. In fact, so there is a little bit of metabolic slowdown that happens with alcohol. It impedes your ability to burn fat. I'm not entirely sure why. I feel like it's probably because alcohol is fat soluble. That would seem to make sense to me. But you can also have pretty good athletic performance too without giving up beer as well. In fact, I can tell you 2 stories for sure. There's a UFC fighter who actually has a beer sponsorship, so he absolutely doesn't give up beer. And then there's a story of, I think it was David Wells, who was a pitcher. I think it was with the Blue Jays. And he ended up throwing a no-hitter hungover, which is like absolutely remarkable. But the point being is you need to manage your alcohol consumption based on what your goals are and how much it's going to get in the way of those goals. All right, so we'll move on from there. Is there any merit to intermittent fasting? Yeah, there is. I think there's merit to all of those sort of diet and nutritional systems that are out there. Intermittent fasting is great for the kind of person who likes to have a wide variety of meal options or food options. Basically, what intermittent fasting is you give yourself a window to consume all of your calories. So typically it's something like 6 to 8 hours of the day when you will be eating, and then the rest of the time is spent fasting. So typically it includes like your sleep. Obviously you don't eat. Well, most people don't eat in their sleep, but you kind of give yourself that window. It's usually about 6 to 8 hours, and then the rest of the time you're not eating at all. So this is a great opportunity for people who like to have a wide variety of foods and maybe struggle with how much they're eating. So if you're someone who is constantly going back to the buffet table, then maybe you want to give yourself an eating window as opposed to trying to plan out your meals throughout the day. The other thing that's kind of built into this question is that I don't think fitness professionals should get emotional about the types of tools they're using to help benefit their clients. It should all come from what the client's goal is and you determining what is required for that client to achieve their goal. So if you're someone who subscribes to intermittent fasting, then fantastic. But that may not be the best approach for your client. Maybe your client likes to eat several small meals throughout the day, but that might cover more than the necessary time frame. In which case, your better bet might be to figure out what they should be eating over the course of those 12 hours that they're up and needing that fuel versus restricting their time frame. The other thing that comes in with fasting is if you're someone who suffers from cravings, this might not be the best approach for you. For example, let's say you're starting your day, like say breakfast is at 9 a.m. and then your dinner's at 5. Well, if you're someone who ends up having trouble later on in the evening, like say by 8 or 9 p.m., where you're not supposed to be eating, you're going to run into problems. You're going to really struggle with fasting. So that might not be the best approach for you. That's probably someone who wants to have 7 or 8 meals actually planned out for them, rather than restricting the times when they eat. So do you suggest any nutritional programs such as paleo or keto? So I kind of got into that with the last question as well. No, I don't follow or suggest. Well, that's not, so I don't follow any nutritional programs in the sense that I don't subscribe to them. Like I said with the intermittent fasting question, I don't think fitness professionals should kind of marry themselves to a singular approach. I think you need to approach things from whatever the client's goal is. So if that, if you're the keto guy, your clients may not respond best to a ketogenic diet. If you're a paleo person, you may have the same problems. It's a better approach to look at your client and try to figure out what is going to be the best approach for them. And we get into this a lot with the sort of influencer marketing type fitness professionals, where they're essentially just telling you their story and telling you what worked best for them. And that's fantastic, except that when you run into the problem of what worked best for me may not be the best approach for my client, who all of a sudden has decided to pay me a whole bunch of money to get them towards their goals. And if I can't deliver on that, I'm not going to be in business for very long. So I don't think you should subscribe solely to one approach or the other. I think you should follow them in the sense that you need to have some sort of basic understanding of what diets are out there, at least what the popular diets are, as a fitness professional. But I don't think you should subscribe to them. And in terms of suggesting a nutritional program, my suggestion would be to figure out what is going to be the best nutritional approach for the client based on their current nutritional needs and what they're currently eating. So whatever they're already doing now, and then couple that with what they need. So no, I don't subscribe to one particular diet or the other. I'll use them all, or bits and pieces from each one, and figure out sort of what's going to operate best for the client. So based on my primary goal to build muscle while losing fat, what would be your fundamental recommendation for a nutrition program? Well, first and foremost is you don't have a primary goal. Your primary goal can't be to do two things. Your primary goal needs to be to focus on one thing. Now, that being said, it is certainly possible to build muscle while losing fat. But you need to focus on one or the other. What I get into with my clients is what's more important to you? Why do you want to build muscle, and why do you want to lose fat? And after having a conversation with them, that answer usually becomes pretty clear. So why do you want to build muscle? Now, I'll make an assumption. If you're trying to build muscle and lose fat, chances are you're wanting to see some sort of muscle definition happening. You're wanting to see the muscles. In that case, my suggestion would be to start with losing fat, because you're going to see the muscle sooner than if you're trying to just build muscle. If you're trying to build muscle, we have to look at why. Like, is this, are you looking to compete in a bodybuilding show, or are you trying to be stronger? Because building muscle is different than building strength. So there's something sort of built into that idea of building muscle already in this question that would need to be clarified. What would be my recommendation for a nutritional program? I start with pretty broad strokes when it comes to nutrition. In this example where you want to build some muscle and lose some fat, the first thing you should do is increase your protein. So that would be the number one macro that I would look at. I would look at how much protein you're actually eating. There's a lot of research out there right now that suggests higher protein diets tend to lead or yield the best results in both fat loss and building muscle. So I would start there. Then I would look at your essential fats, build out your caloric need for that, and then I would fill the rest in with your carbohydrates. That's basically what my recommendation would be for that. And then essentially we would just sort of see what happens. So there would be a lot of testing involved. We would look at your body fat and that kind of thing, how much lean tissue you've got. We'd probably run, increase your protein, increase your fats, and then decrease your carbohydrates, see how you responded to that, retest you in a couple of weeks, and see what's going on. So that would be my nutritional recommendation. So in a previous email, you mentioned that I can link MyFitnessPal, and you would make meal plans available via email or on the platform. Does this take into account my particular goals and level of activity? Both your workouts and my own extracurricular exercise. Yeah, absolutely. I use an app that I communicate with all of my clients with. We can link MyFitnessPal to it, just to give you guys a bit of context behind this question. And then the meal plans are actually available through the app. We don't do email anymore. It's all delivered through the one platform. And those meal plans, I have a couple different entry plans for nutrition. It's included with my premium package. We do customized meal planning, so something that's very, very specific to each individual. And then we also do sort of meal plan ideas. So there's a second entry point for nutrition, which based on your goals and based on the types of food that you enjoy and how many calories you need to be eating, we put together sort of meal plan ideas. And when I say we, I work with a team of dietitians, nutritionists, and doctors who have built all of these nutritional programs. So you're getting something that is scientifically designed and not just based on my knowledge or lack of knowledge or my beliefs. Anything that could possibly get in the way of you achieving the best results possible. And then I also offer the nutrition as an add-on to my other services. So you can add it on to a program as well, which has been very popular. And then you can link MyFitnessPal to sort of track your calories and macros and whatnot throughout the week and day and whatnot. So that's how the platform works, just to give you a bit of context. And then, yes, I do make the meal plans based on what your particular goal is. And I'll get into that question a little bit. I mean, that's a really important distinction to make, is that if you're working with a professional who's not working you towards your goals or trying to impose goals onto you, you probably need to fire them and find somebody else. That's really not why you would hire somebody. So yeah, everything is with whatever your nutritional goal or whatever your fitness goal is in mind, or your health goals. It's all built around that. And yes, based on your level of activity, that's how we get our results, right? We need to be able to understand how much activity our clients are getting in throughout the week, and we need to adjust accordingly. So if you are someone who's doing a lot of, who is very active, then yes, you'll have a higher calorie count in your nutritional programs because you need it, right? One thing I absolutely hate is when a client gets back to me and they're like, man, I don't have the energy to do some of the things that I love. And that's really what a trainer should be doing, is making sure that you're not floored from your workouts, but that you should have more energy to do all of the things that you love to do throughout the day and the week. So yeah, everything is based on your level of activity. It's all based on your goals. The workouts, when I program workouts for people, it includes everything. So I'm looking at what you need for conditioning. I'm looking at what you need for strength. I'm looking at what's going to be required for whatever your goal might be. If you're, trying to get stronger, if you're trying to lose some fat, whatever that might be, we're going to work on that. And like I said, it's going to include everything. So your extracurricular exercises, I wouldn't call them exercises. I would call them activity. So I'm going to handle all of your exercise stuff. I want to make sure that all of my clients have everything that they need to do, whatever it is that they're training for. Now, here's a side point. I train a lot of jiu-jitsu athletes and martial artists, and the most difficult thing to do is to make them stop exercising or stop doing a lot of extracurricular stuff. And it's actually been really interesting because with the quarantine, we've had some of the best results I think I've ever seen, because quite honestly, they couldn't go train. So we've got, like, all of a sudden, all of my athletes have no injuries. And I think there's something to be said there about recovery. Anyway, extracurricular activities, things like gardening, for example, being that it's spring and I think people are starting to think about that kind of thing, or at least doing it. I know my mom is. But when it comes to extracurricular activities, I wouldn't call them exercises. And the reason I don't count things like gardening as exercise, I would count it as an activity, is because you can't measure it. You can't say I did an hour of gardening today, so next week I'll do an hour and a half of gardening, because the level of effort during that gardening could range from everything from like digging a hole to like watering flowers, right? So it's very difficult to measure something like gardening. But that being said, it should be taken into account with your total volume of activity throughout the week, but not necessarily your exercises. So in addition to the workouts that you will prescribe, do you have any suggestions regarding additional cardio? The more the merrier. Or should I follow any particular guidance? Okay, so a couple things here. Like I said in the last question there, I will take care of everything for you. Regarding like cardio and all that, yeah, I build that all into your strength and that's why it's a strength and conditioning program, is because we look at what's going to make you stronger and we look at what's going to make you more conditioned as a human being for whatever it is that you're trying to get better at or trying to accomplish. So yeah, in terms of suggestions, I do make a lot of suggestions. And by the way, I don't just program like, hey, you're going to run today if you're not a runner, or hey, you're going to cycle today. And then it turns out you don't have a bike, so you don't do it anyway. I work with you and figure out, what's going to be the best solutions for your goals. Again, it's all about your goals. That's kind of been the theme today. And then should you follow any particular guidance? You absolutely should. That's the entire reason you hire somebody. So here's an example. If you were driving your car and the engine light came on and you didn't know why, you would probably take your car into a garage and they would tell you why the engine light came on. Maybe the guy says to you, oh, you need an oil change. Okay, great, thanks. So you would follow his guidance. You take your car back home, and then what if you didn't know how to do an oil change? Chances are you'd have the garage just do the oil change, but let's say you didn't. And you went home, and then you're like, well, my car needs an oil change. So you went on YouTube, and you looked up how to do an oil change. What you're doing is following guidance. And the same sort of thing should be done with your trainer as well. So if you're going to reach out and ask somebody for particular guidance, you should probably follow it. Because built into that question is already the admittance that whatever you're doing is not working. I'll give you an example. I had a former client of mine messaged me a few weeks ago, and she was trying to do like a glute workout, but she felt like her glutes weren't activating, or she wasn't feeling the exercise in her glutes. So I asked her where do they feel it? And it turns out that they were feeling it more in their lower back, so they were doing a hip press exercise. So that's where you're lying on your back with your feet flat on the floor or your heels on the floor, and then you push your hips up. In this case, they had a band around their knees as well. So my recommendation to them was that the next time you go to do that hip press, take your hands and actually put them on your butt. And that's going to give you some feedback, right? So that's automatically going to get you to sort of flex your glutes as you raise your hips up off the ground. So what we were trying to figure out is whether or not her glutes were actually being used, or if she was just arching her lower back. She said she felt it in her lower back. So chances are that was the case. So we removed the band, had her put her hands right on her glutes, and I instructed her to feel her glutes tighten as she raised her hips up. Then after doing, say, 10 of those or 8 of those, whatever it might have been, we put the band back on. This is all done over Instagram, by the way. I wasn't there in person. We put the band back on, and I instructed her to focus just on pulling the band apart. So what that does is it creates external rotation in your hips, which is what you actually use your glute med for. So when she did that, all of a sudden, yeah, she was feeling it a lot more. I followed up with her, and she's like, yeah, I feel it in my glutes now. Thanks. Great. But the point there was, she followed the guidance and got the result that she wanted. If you're following the guidance and you don't get the result you want, you need to seek out somebody else who can provide you with the guidance that you're looking for. Regarding the workouts, the schedule online you described indicates heavy versus light days. Would it be useful for me to send you a list of the weights that I currently use for various exercises? Yeah, it would be helpful. I think that as much information as you can get from a client is a really great place to start, as well as having an open sort of dialogue of communication with your clients. So when you're just starting with someone, it's really important to know what they've done in the past, what they're currently doing, what weights they're using, what exercises they're doing. That's going to give you a good idea to establish a good starting point. For example, if somebody came to you and you didn't send your trainer the weights that you're currently doing, they could underprescribe a lift for you. And then, that's not going to help anybody. You're going to get frustrated with your trainer and say, hey, this is too light, which is great feedback, by the way, if you do feel that, you're not being challenged enough, and then your trainer should be able to progress the exercise. The other point in that is that, the scheduled online workouts, yes, I don't look at it as heavy versus light days. How am I going to say this? So what we do is we progress exercises in several different ways. One of them being with weights, one of them being with reps. We also look at the movement pattern involved and how we can manipulate essentially those three things. So the weight, the reps, and the movement pattern mostly. There's a few other options we've got in there, like tempo and whatnot. We'll do that a lot as well. But for the most part, that's how I look at it. So typically, if say you finished a quote unquote heavy day or a heavy week maybe, and we've lowered the amount of weight you're using, it's probably because somewhere else in that program, the movement pattern has changed or the total volume throughout the week has changed. So there's a lot going on in the programs behind the scenes that you may not be aware of. And to be honest, I think the best, most successful clients are the ones who are unaware of it. They literally they take the program, they execute it to the best of their ability, they send me feedback, and we progress. They tend to have the best results. They don't necessarily, questioning things are great, having feedback is great, but they don't necessarily get caught up on, hey, I'm not lifting as much weight as I did, say, last week. There's always a reason for it. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit. But it is absolutely useful to have various exercises that you've done. It just helps establish a starting point or establish where you're at currently. So that's the last question that I've got. I'm going to just sort of pop in here and just see if there's any questions in the actual chat. So that's the last question. It doesn't look like there's too much there. Anyway, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. It would be greatly appreciated if you would share this video around, give it a like and whatnot. That would mean a lot to me for sure. And that'll be it for the weekend as well. I'll see you all back here on Monday. Again, if you would like to have your questions answered, just send me an email or a message or whatever it is. And what I'll do is I'll collect all of the questions that I get over the course of the week. And every Friday I'll come on here and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys all have a great weekend. Bye.